Okay, so I'm going to quickly go over some of the predictions for the two by-elections tomorrow, which are quite important by-elections for Labour, as nationally Labour's doing pretty badly at the moment with declines in the polls. So these by-elections may be an indication, a proxy, as it were, as to the sort of conditions that are to come in 2020. Although we should keep in mind that by-elections behave very differently to national elections, so we can't use the national swings to predict the by-elections. So this should be bared in mind. Anyway, I'm going to look at the ways that the votes will migrate and try and predict the results in the Stoke Central by-election and then the Copeland by-election, which is also a very important by-election for the Labour Party. Okay, so the first factor that we have is that we would expect some of the Labour votes to go to UKIP through this anti-establishment vote. So a lot of the sort of working class vote will feel very disenfranchised by Labour, so will feel that UKIP is a very viable alternative, particularly since Stoke Central is a very Brexit city, and this particular candidate was Remain. Although Brexit isn't going to be the most important issue in the Stoke by-election, the NHS will be more important. And the fact that the candidate has, in the past, talked about privatisation of the NHS means that this swing from Labour to UKIP might not be as big as some people expect. But nevertheless, there will be some Labour votes that migrate to UKIP, simply because it's the logical alternative for traditional working class Labour voters that have become increasingly disenfranchised with Labour. But on the other hand, we will also see some of these redefections from UKIP to the Conservative Party. Theresa May is quite a popular Prime Minister among UKIP voters. She is sort of going for a broad church approach and trying to engage with the largest section of the population, and sort of a lot of the UKIP voters that left the party in 2014, she's trying to bring them back. So she's going with a very hard pro-Brexit stance, and she's adopting a lot of the UKIP policies, such as the ones on grammar schools. So a lot of high UKIP, prolific UKIP figures have defected back to the Tories, particularly since the scene is a little bit redundant now. So we would still expect to see some of these redefections from UKIP to the Conservatives. Although in Stoke, maybe not that important, because the sort of people that voted UKIP in Stoke are not the sort of people that would have defected from the Conservative Party in the first place. They would have been Labour defectors. So we would still expect to see some defections though from UKIP to Conservatives, but not a huge number. So the next thing to bear in mind is that we would expect tactical voting in a by-election. I don't expect this to be a huge thing this time around, but we would expect some Conservatives will tactically vote for UKIP in order to try and prevent Labour from getting in. The Conservatives are actually running a pretty lacklustre campaign, although the candidate is pretty impressive in terms of his public speaking. But the Conservative Party as a whole is not really interested in winning this by-election. Not that they would really have much of a chance of winning it. Famous last words. But the tactical voting is probably not going to be a huge thing in this issue, in this by-election. Nevertheless, we'd see a few Conservatives voting UKIP, and possibly a few Conservative Remainers voting for Labour in order to prevent UKIP, which is seen as the fringe. But this tactical vote here will be really tiny in Stoke. This would not be a big factor at all, and the Conservative pool is pretty small anyway, so I would not expect these to be a massive factor. We'd also possibly see a few Lib Dems defecting to the Labour Party in order purely to stop UKIP from getting in. Possibly a bigger factor here than these two. Okay, so what else? So we would expect quite a big pro-Europe backlash from Labour to the Lib Dems. So now this is going to be a very significant factor, probably more so in the Copeland by-election. Now, there aren't actually that many sort of liberal Islington type Remainers in Stoke Central. Of course, it's a very Brexit city, so even though I've drawn this arrow quite big, that's only because I expect that the liberal type Remainers that there are in Stoke will flock to Lib Dems in their droves. But there aren't actually a very high proportion of these people around. But of the ones that are around, a lot of them will defect to Lib Dems in order to promote this pro-Europe message. So I would expect the Lib Dems to do quite well in this by-election and gain some potential vote share. But again, this is not going to be a huge factor because these type of voters aren't very abundant in Stoke. Nevertheless, if the Lib Dems run a good campaign, this could actually sneak UKIP through. This would be the best chance of UKIP to win, ironically, actually. Okay, so we've had a few scandals. So we've famously had the Hillsborough scandal, where Paul Nuttall admitted that he didn't lose close friends at Hillsborough, and then Labour has made some gaffe type remarks about Brexit. I wouldn't expect these remarks to affect the result massively. If anything, the UKIP one would probably be more of a problem for them. But I won't expect it to be a huge factor. Scandals are always quite sort of prolific in the media, but they don't really play a big role in the elections themselves. So I would expect UKIP to lose votes from this. Labour probably not really. I wouldn't expect too much to be going on there. But I don't expect these to be a massively important factor. Okay, so let's continue. Ground campaigns. So the strength of the ground campaign is important. So notably, I've put arrows to all of them except the Conservative Party, because the Conservative Party isn't really running much of a ground campaign. Or that's the Conservative Party's opinion. They're not really interested in winning. UKIP is running quite a strong ground campaign, although there have again been lots of gaffes, high-profile gaffes, again with the scandals. So maybe these two arrows will cancel each other out. Note that even though I'm drawing arrows coming from outside, we would expect the turnout and the actual number of votes to go down. So these arrows are just sort of schematics. We would expect the actual number of votes to go down, not go up. In by-elections, they basically never really go up. So that's something to just emphasise there. A few non-voters might vote Lib Dems. Again, there's this pro-European vote, but I don't expect this to be a massive factor. Okay, and then finally we have to take into account this generalised national swing from Labour to the Conservative Party. Although keep in mind this is a by-election, and the governing party almost never really does well in a by-election. So it would be quite amazing, really, for the Conservatives to actually increase their percentage vote share in this by-election. I think they could do it, but it would be quite a historic event, really, for this to happen. In fact, this national swing from Labour to the Conservative Party in itself during the incumbent party's term is pretty extraordinary. Anyway, with all this bared in mind, I'm going to attempt to make the prediction. So I think Labour will lose out. They'll lose a lot of votes to UKIP. They'll even lose a couple to the Conservatives, despite the fact that Stoke is a very pro-Labour city. They'll lose a lot of their Remain vote to the Lib Dems, and so I'd expect Labour to do pretty poorly. Nevertheless, I still expect them to win. UKIP, a fairly lacklustre performance. I think people overestimate how well they'll do. Some UKIP voters will defect to Conservatives, maybe not that many. The scandals will also hurt UKIP. So I would expect the UKIP to gain a few votes, but they would also lose a lot of votes to apathy. Some people don't vote in by-elections, simply put, and I'm just sort of wondering how determined these voters are to vote UKIP now that Brexit has happened. So I don't think UKIP is going to gain that much in the way of popular support. 3% I think is about right. Conservatives, slight loss, but this is what you would expect from a by-election in a very pro-Labour area. I think it's possible the Conservatives could gain, but I think that would be extraordinary in itself. But I think about the same. Lib Dems, I expect quite a significant gain, mostly as a result of the Remain clique that does exist are going to flock to Lib Dems, even though there aren't actually that many of them. So I expect this to be a Labour hold, but note that I do expect UKIP to come pretty close. So I wouldn't be surprised if UKIP does win. And the Conservatives aren't actually that far off as well in terms of percentages. So when people are saying this is a three-horse race, it's possible that's reasonable. So very slight win for Labour. They managed to just hold it by the skin of their teeth. I wouldn't be surprised if UKIP wins it, but my prediction is Labour. Okay, so I don't have time to do the vote migrations for Copeland, but I'm going to do a prediction anyway. So my prediction is the Conservatives win in an extraordinary and a historic result that hasn't happened in decades, where the incumbent governing party has won the by-election. So the Conservatives managed to win. They still lose the proportional vote, but because of a generalised swing from Labour to the Conservatives, they still managed to win. So the Lib Dems do extremely well out of this. There's a lot more potential for Remain voters to flock to the Lib Dems, and this is part of the reason why that allows the Conservatives to lick through. So a lot more Lib Dem support in Copeland, very strong. UKIP, a fairly underwhelming performance. I'd expect sort of tactical voting to harm them in this case. So I'd expect a Conservative win in Copeland, which is a miraculous and surprising result in itself. Anyway, this is my thoughts just before the by-election. I hope people found this interesting.